So here are the two tiny cameras which I bought on Amazon, made in China of course. The one on the left is the cheap version for €6 including postage. The one on the right, which is stocked locally in Germany, costs €16 plus postage. And there are quite a few differences between these two different cameras. They're both called SQ11 MiniDV Full HD cameras. The one on the left is cheaply made. You can see the difference in quality. It feels lighter, and the more expensive one is quite a bit heavier. I'm not quite sure why yet. I haven't opened it to take a look yet, but I'm sure I'll get around to that. Maybe it has a better battery. I can't imagine the LEDs add to the weight, because this left-hand cheap camera does not have LEDs on the front. These infrared LEDs are not LEDs. The 6 little bumps are just plastic. Whereas on this one, the more expensive one, the 6 little bumps around the front are real infrared LEDs, and they actually work. Also, the cheaper one, the manual, is single-sided, and on the back there's nothing printed. And the more expensive one has a double-sided manual in English and in German, because this one was obviously made for the German market. So, as you can see, they're two similar-looking products. They both have the same Go Faster stripes on them, for those people who remember what those were when you put them on your car in the good old days. And even looking at the packaging, the cheaper one, the packaging didn't survive in the post so well. It's very crinkly and flimsy. The more expensive one has a more solid plastic packaging and comes with an extra camera strap which you can hang on your keychain or whatever. And also even the boxes, the cheaper one is more easily damaged and thinner paper. The more expensive one has a more solid box which didn't get so damaged in the post. And you can see that they use slightly different inks between these two products. And also the shade of white of the boxes are different, indicating that there's definitely some difference in quality. The cheap one has a model number which is SY77502, and the more expensive one has a model number on it which is X000RX74FH. Most of the people selling these don't seem to make any difference between the cheaper and the more expensive version, and I'm wondering if actually this cheaper one is a copy, a fake copy of the real one, which is the more expensive one. I don't know. They seem to have come from the same factory, probably, but who knows. What I'll be doing is filming a little bit of video with each of these. They both have sensors which are sensitive to normal daylight and give quite good normal colors, and also infrared light. And in the darkness, then you can see when using infrared lighting that they work quite well. The unusual thing is that with daylight, it doesn't have the kind of pink tinge which you normally get with an infrared camera in daylight. So it's quite clever how they managed to make that happen. I'm not sure yet how that works. This one you can't really see, but it has, for a lens, there's a flat, like a filter inside. The cheap one, the more expensive one, has something that looks a little bit more like a lens inside, but it's impossible to film it on this mobile phone camera. So what I'll do is I'll do some little tests with these and compare the performance, and you'll see quite big differences between them. The one on the right does 1080p or 720p video. The one on the left is only 720p. I get the feeling that this one has a 1 megapixel camera chip and this one has 1.8 or 2 megapixel camera chip. But we will see. So let's have a look at the recordings we can make with these cameras. Let's see how the colors look on this one in daylight. So this is the more expensive camera in daylight, and you look around, you see the colors probably look fairly normal and natural, as you would hope they would. So the first of those two little video clips was filmed with the cheaper camera, and as you probably noticed, the first half of it was missing because the file was corrupted. Only the second half of the video clip actually was able to be loaded into the editor on Windows. So I didn't decide to do it again. I thought I'd leave it like that to show how reliable that small, cheaper camera is. The more expensive one worked rather better and had a wider angle of view. I think the sound was better, and all in all it's probably a better camera, but different, let's say, to the one I'm using now, which is a very old Webcam sitting on top of a computer monitor. It's a creative live cam chat, filming in 1080 by 720, which is the maximum resolution, and using the microphone on that camera too, which is it works okay for video conferencing. There's a lot of echo in this room. It's quite a big room. And what I'm going to be doing later, once it's got dark, is to try those two small cameras in the dark using infrared lighting. One of them has built-in LEDs, the other one doesn't. And I'll also be using these two lamps, or flashlights as we call them in America. This one's 850 nanometers, and the webcam that I normally use with the computer can see it, but this lamp is much brighter than it looks here. This one is 940 nanometers, which is a longer wavelength, and I can't see anything when I look at that at all. My eyes do not pick up any light. The webcam picks up a little. I think the webcam picks up more from this shorter wavelength, and I can see a very dull red glow, like in some of the cheaper security cameras where you can see the infrared lighting's on. Anyway, let's wait for it to get to dark and then make another experiment with those two tiny cameras. So this is the cheaper camera, which is looking at my keyboard in the dark. It doesn't have its own illumination, so this is now a 940 nanometer flashlight I'm using to illuminate the keyboard. You can see the camera is quite sensitive. And this is the cheaper one. If I turn off the infrared lamp, which I can't see of course, and you go to the other one, the 850 nanometer lamp, which I can see as a dull red glow, actually it hardly makes any difference. You can just see the illumination on the keyboard, but this little cheaper camera is not really able to see it. The 850 nanometers compared to this 940 nanometer longer wavelength infrared lamp, which is invisible to the naked eye. So that's the cheaper camera. It does actually produce images with infrared lighting in the dark, as long as you have your own infrared lamp. And this one is the more expensive camera in the dark, looking at my keyboard, and already you can actually make out the keyboard slightly because of the light coming from the LCD monitor. It's very dim, but this camera is sensitive enough to see it. And if I switch on the 940 nanometer infrared lamp, you can see that it looks really bright. It certainly is able to illuminate this keyboard. Let's try the other shorter wavelength infrared lamp, the 850 nanometer. And again, it doesn't really look very bright. And this lamp does work, and it is bright. It just means that the camera is not sensitive to 850 nanometers like that, but is far more sensitive to this 940 nanometers, which, as you can see, really looks very bright. And this is the more expensive camera. What I'm doing is I'm cheating, and I'm using it as a webcam plugged into a Windows 10 PC. And if there's no micro SD card in these small cameras, then they do actually work as webcams when you connect them via a USB cable to a PC. I'd also tried it with Mac OS, and then it's very, very slow at loading the images. The frame rate is extremely low, not really usable as a webcam. And I also tried it on Linux, and the cameras, both of them, were just not found as video input devices. And I didn't want to mess around to install drivers. I wanted to be able to use them out of the box. So they, as a webcam, these little cameras work best with Windows. Its own infrared lamps, so I'm going to switch on my own infrared 940 nanometer lamp, which this camera can see better, and hopefully that's illuminating the keyboard and we're managing to see something. There's no display on these cameras, of course, so you don't know what they're seeing or even if they're recording until you take the micro SD card out or plug in the USB cable to read the files from the camera. So this is the more expensive camera, which is now working in the dark, looking at the keyboard and using its own infrared lighting. It's also reflecting off the screen, I know, because I'm cheating and I'm using another camera, an infrared camera, to look at what I'm doing to make sure that the infrared LEDs are switched on, because you have no way of knowing whether they're on or off. And the first time I tried to record this, I recorded the video with them off and I thought they were on. So it's easy to lose track of what you're doing because there are no displays on these cameras. So that is the infrared output from the tiny camera, the more expensive one, and it's illuminating the keyboard and seems to work. If I turn on my desk lamp, you can see there's the tunnel effect. You can see that this smallest, cheapest camera actually works quite well as a webcam. It's not too bad at all, and that's just a fairly dim table lamp at night time. So it has its uses perhaps as a cheap webcam if you can't perhaps use it as a real mobile video camera as it's intended. So I think this just wraps up the comparison between these two small cameras, and you make your own decision about which one is better, which one is better value for money. The cheaper one is €6 including postage from China, and the more expensive one is €16 including postage within Germany. So you decide if the cheaper one is a genuine camera or just perhaps a fake copy of this one. Who knows? Anyway, thanks for listening, and let's see what I try out next.